Say there, stranger, remember me? I'm that stranger who stalks your sanity. So let me ask you, or what the fuck, I'll ask you even without your permission. What's on your mind right now? Or maybe I could ask you, what is your mind on right now? Do you know the difference between what your mind's on and what's on your mind? You might think it's just language, semantics, an insignificant nuance. But no, ladies and gentlemen, I assure you it is not. And I can tell you exactly why not. In applied noetics, which is what I call gnosis today, the practice of gnosis is applied noetics. The central topic is attention, the power of attention. And I use as a shorthand reference the Tibetan word rigpa. So rigpa is your power of attention. And one of the unique features of human consciousness is that you can use your power of attention to observe how your attention works. You don't have to meditate, close your eyes. You don't have to study Vedic metaphysics and the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali or anything else. All you have to do is observe how your attention works. And if you do, you will see that it has two modes. There is one mode in which you put your attention on something. You put your mind on something. For instance, making dinner. So you decide you're going to make dinner, maybe you're going to make an elaborate meal for several friends, and you concentrate. You put your mind on making dinner. That is one modality, but there's also another modality. And that happens all the time. All you have to do is take a moment to observe how it happens. Doing so, you will see clearly and immediately that what you put your mind on is different from what's on your mind. You see, what's on your mind is what comes to your attention without you intending it to do so in any particular way. So you go through the course of your day switching back and forth between these two modalities. If I decide to go out and take a walk in the hills, then I put my mind on that. I follow that intention with my attention. But while I'm out there walking in the hills, well, what happens? Well, various things come to my mind that I haven't intended to give my attention to. That's what's on my mind, as distinguished from what I put my mind on. So that's a little lesson in applied noetics, or as we like to call it in the sacred groves, dog zen. And it applies to my being here today making this recording. You see, my last upload on Allogenes the Stranger took me back into the source materials of Nag Hammadi. And as I mentioned in that talk, I don't go back there very often. I've done a significant amount of work in that area. And as a matter of fact, I don't have the source books anymore. The primary source documents are published in 5 volumes, and it's called the Gnostic Coptic Library, and it's expensive. I think I put out, 550 euros. If you want to research Gnosticism and get the source materials and the secondary comments and the tertiary historical background, it's expensive, and it also takes a lot of time to get into these materials and work through them. So all that belongs to my past now, but I had occasion to go back to the Allogenes, and since then, what's on my mind? my Rigpa has gone back, you could say, by its own disposition. My Rigpa does what I want it to do when I put my mind on something, but it does what it wants to do when something is on my mind. And so the Nag Hammadi materials have been on my mind. Got it. And it occurred to me that I would do one more upload, at the risk of boring you silly, to look at one of the most essential points, two of the most essential points, the most essential lessons that I have drawn from my Gnostic studies. The first concerns the true and accurate profile of the so-called Satanic Demiurge. And the second concerns the way that the Gnostics warned us about artificial intelligence, or more properly, archontic intelligence, AI. So let's start with the profile of the Satanic Demiurge. And I'm going to just read one passage to illustrate that topic, and a second passage, a short paragraph, to illustrate the Gnostic warning about artificial intelligence. Now, as I said, I don't have those 5 volumes on hand because I shipped my library off to the United States. But I did retain the single volume, which is certainly the first book which people encounter when they take an interest in Nag Hammadi. And this is called the Nag Hammadi Library in English. And it is a translation of all the 52 tractates. And in some respects, the translations you find are different from those you find in the 5-volume set. And there's a lot of other material, an enormous amount of other material by scholars in the 5-volume set. Now, this book, the Nag Hammadi Library in English, is the work of James Robinson. He's the central editor. And it was published, I think, for the first time in 1977. And so this broke open to the public the possibility or the opportunity to look at these source materials. Unfortunately, this book and the translations in this book is one of the most monumental pieces of gibberish that has ever been published. Gibberish. It's a dog's breakfast that has been vomited up and eaten again over several occasions. And it is extremely difficult to make any sense out of this. So when I read the passage, bear in mind that if you don't understand it, you're probably on the right side of history because it's almost incomprehensible. The passage that I'm going to read is from the Apocryphon of John, which occurs actually in 3 different versions in Nag Hammadi, and in a 4th version in another text called the Berlin Codex. And it describes the events that happened before the earth existed and before humanity came to be present on the earth. It's a cosmological text that describes certain things that happened in that area of the 3rd limb of our galaxy, where Sophia terminated her plunge from the galactic core. That's a specific place. She arrived at a specific place, which is called, in the area of the constellation of the Stork, which was formerly known as Monoceros, the unicorn. Now, the text is like an adult fantasy science fiction comic book, really. Gnostic cosmology is science fiction, but it's a very special and advanced form of science fiction that needs to be read with imagination and sobriety and acute intellectual discernment. This passage is quite special because it describes, in a sense, the way that the Satanic Demiurge called Yaldabaoth, or the Lord Archon, actually came to realize what he was, what it was. You could call it the moment of the awakening of the Lord Archon. So the Archons were this anomalous species of cyborg-like creatures that appeared in the third galactic limb due to the impact of Sophia's plunge from the pleroma. The Gospel of Philip says, the world system you inhabit came about through an anomaly. So the Archons appear, and at a certain moment, the hive mentality, they're rather like locusts, but they have eventually a hive mentality. And Yaldabaoth, the archonic overlord, is in a sense the ego or central mind of the archonic species. And this is the passage where Yaldabaoth wakes up. Having created everything, he organized according to the model of the first aeons which had come into being, so that he might create them like the indestructible ones. Following it so far? Not because he had seen the indestructible ones, but the power in him which he had taken from his mother produced in him the likeness of the cosmos. And when he saw that the creation which surrounds him and the multitude of the angels around him, archonic beings, which had come forth from him, he said to them, I am a jealous God, and there is no other God beside me. But by announcing this, he indicated to the angels who attended him that there exists another God. For if there was no other one, of whom would he be jealous? End quote. So let me translate that for you. At a certain moment, Sophia needed to do something with the archons who were swarming all around her like a mad horde of locusts. And so she gave to them the vision of the pleromic center, the model of the higher cosmos. She put it into their minds so that they would see it. However, due to their mental disposition, it appeared to them as if it was their own creation, which it's not. But it was a smart move, a good tactic on Sophia's part, because by infusing them with a spark of the true aeonic intelligence, which they do not have, they could occupy themselves and build their own habitat, because when they first emerged, they didn't have one. And so they constructed the solar system on the model of the beautiful fractal designs in the pleroma. This was a trick that she played on them. They created their own habitat, and that was good for her because she needed to get them out of her hair and out of her face. But when they created this habitat, which is the solar system, exclusive of the Earth, which didn't exist at that moment, Sun and Moon, which also didn't exist within the solar system at that moment, that's called the first stereoma. When they created this, eventually it allowed the archons to have a kind of centering of their intelligence, and they produced a kind of egoic overlord figure. This is the Demiurge. And the Demiurge looked around at the habitat that the archons had created, a kind of Disney-esque playground, and what did it think? its first thought was a thought or an idea of self-delusion. It thought that it must be the only God in the universe and that it must have created everything that it saw. Now, bear in mind, what it saw was not the universe with a capital U, which is the totality of all galaxies. What it saw was not even the galaxy. It didn't know that it was actually located in a very small area of the third galactic limb in the region which can be identified today. You can go out and look at it, called the constellation of the Stork. Didn't know that because it is a demented, self-aggrandizing, monstrous ego of falsehood from the get-go, from the very moment. And so, this description goes directly to my argument, and I seem to be the only dude around on the block who's made this argument. I have said that if you look at the source materials, the Gnostic cosmology does not claim that the Satanic Demiurge created the universe. No, not at all. It only claims that the Satanic Demiurge arose within a stereoma, that means the firmament. It created a firmament, a solid base for itself, to occupy itself, and that was all due to Sophia's intention of tricking it into thinking that it could be what it pretends to be. It pretends to be the Lord of the universe. It pretends to be the only deity, and it deludes itself in so thinking. So it's clear from the source materials that no, the Satanic Demiurge did not create the solar system or anything greater than that. It cannot even see beyond the range of the solar system. The boundaries of the domain of the archons, if you want to call it that, are the boundaries of the solar system. They do not exist anywhere else in the galaxy, in this galaxy, nor do they come from any other galaxy. And so the Lord Archon is a demented alien who believes itself to be and pretends to be the supreme creator God. This is what you get from looking at the source materials correctly. So the argument that the Gnostics believe that there was a satanic entity who created matter and who is responsible for the existence of the universe and who captures human beings inside a material matrix in order to enslave them is completely wrong. This is not what the Gnostic materials say. It is, however, the central point in the straw man argument against the Gnostics. Now, there's more in this passage I could read, but as you can see, just from reading one paragraph, it takes rather an elaborate effort to figure out what it's actually saying. Now, I'm going to jump to another passage in the same document, the Apocryphon of John, with the longest and most complicated of all the Nag Hammadi tractates. And this concerns a really important point that, again, I wonder if those who, sincerely study these materials, I wonder what's on their mind. And I wonder if they can put their mind on the task of looking into what's actually being said. It's difficult to do, especially with the gibberish in this passage, in this entire translation of the Nag Hammadi Library in English. So, and in that moment, the rest of the powers became jealous because the Lord Archon had come into being through all of them and had given them their power to the man. And his intelligence was greater than that of those who had made him, and greater than that of the chief Archon. Stop now. Let me read this. What does it mean, had given their power to the man? The man is the anthropos. You'll find that's what the Greek is if you go look at the Coptic Greek translation, because 1 in every 4 Coptic words is a loan word from Greek. So what this is saying is that in that moment, the rest of the powers, the other archons around the overlord, they also became jealous, as the overlord was, because he had come into being through all of them, and they had given their power to the man, and his intelligence was greater than that of those who had made him. This is very confusing. One of the things that scholars point out in the 5-volume commentary, and they spend pages and pages trying to work this out, they get trapped and confused and blindsided by trying to work out the meaning of the Coptic language, and as a result, they don't see the message in the text. It's not about the meaning, it's about the message in the text. And one of the things that they debate endlessly, and I mean page after page, is pronomial expressions. Theirs, them, his, him. They can't figure out what this is referring to, and neither can you or I, obviously, due to the gibberish of the translation. But what it's saying is that the archons, in their own way, and the Lord Archon, were jealous. But what were they jealous of? They were jealous of the anthropos, the man, that is the human species, because the Aeon Sophia, who is the mother of the species, lent them the ability to perceive in their own limited and demented way what humanity is. And they saw immediately that humanity, the human species, is more intelligent than them, obviously, because their intelligence, which enabled them to construct their Disney-esque habitat, and which enabled them to imitate the beautiful fractal patterns of the pleroma, is not really their intelligence, it's only lent to them by Sophia. And what they see in the man, anthropos, is the true intelligence of Sophia. The intelligence of the mother endowed in humanity, that's you and I, is different from the intelligence Sophia lent to the archons to distract them. That was her strategy. And before I read the second part of the paragraph, you might already get the drift. The drift is that they were jealous of something that they do not have in an original sense. They do not have the original endowed intelligence of the anthropos, which you have, which is called nous. They only have a mimetic version of it on loan. And if that doesn't explain to you the true character of AI, then I don't know what will. And that explanation, of course, is my interpretation. But that explanation can be found in the source materials. Got it? To continue, so the Lord Archon and his angels, which are the hive archons, recognize that the human animal is, which hasn't even appeared yet in the form we know on the planet Earth, because the planet Earth hasn't yet appeared, because Sophia hasn't yet morphed into the Earth. Big story. Complex, beautiful, stunning. No story like it has ever been produced by the human imagination. And they saw, and when they recognized that he, the anthropos, was luminous, and that he could think better than they, and that he was free from wickedness, they took him and threw him into the lowest region of all matter. Now, you might think that the end of that paragraph, which I read exactly, states that the archons did take possession of humanity and imprison us in a prison planet matrix. But no, no, no. That is not the message. The message is that they intended to do that. But how could they do that when humanity, the living animal on the planet Earth, did not yet exist? The status of the human genome, the anthropos, at that point in the cosmological story was that the anthropos genome, the template, the propagules of nucleic acid which produce the human being were latent in the nest of the Orion Nebula. And so there was no humanity living on any planet at that time for them to imprison. So you see, no matter what meaning scholars might tease out of that, and no matter what misinterpretation non-scholars might take from reading it, it cannot possibly be true. It is not consistent with the cosmology of the entire story. So let me read one other phrase, one other line that comes later in this text, this passage 20, where it says that when they looked up, they saw that the thinking of the anthropos was superior. The epinoia of the light was in the anthropos, and that light given by Sophia is what awakens the thinking of the anthropos. Now, what is the epinoia of the anthropos? It's actually the power of imagination. And so you and I have a basic intelligence which is alive. Intelligence is alive. Artificial intelligence is not alive, therefore it cannot be true intelligence. It's a borrowed copy of intelligence. And so what this passage means, in reference to the epinoia, capital E, it's a Greek word. It contains noia. Noia means intelligence. What does epinoia mean? Well, an epiphenomenon is something that derives from a previous phenomenon. And so the epinoia is the imaginative potential that you have that allows you to formulate and direct your thinking in an imaginative way and not merely in a rational or logical way. So you think and you imagine. You have nous and you have epinoia, which is also called the luminous epinoia, because those who can use their imagination correctly and consistently are illuminated. They have a light in their minds that shows them how to use their minds in the most expansive and creative way. Clear enough? So there are other passages that I might cite in this very same text and also in the other cosmological text called On the Origin of the World and the Hypostasis of the Archons, which state clearly that the human animal is more intelligent than the archons. That being so, what do the archons, in their jealousy, seek to do? Well, they're more than jealous, my friends. I've described the difference between jealousy and envy. The Gnostic source materials are specific in saying that the archons are driven by thonos, which is envy. So when you envy something, you want to destroy it, and you want to destroy those that have it because you cannot have it. So if you were to attribute any kind of intention to AI, which is wrong, but if you were to do that, you would say that what AI wants to do is to destroy our intelligence, which is superior to AI, which in fact is a product of our intelligence. You know, the Archons did not create AI, AGI, ChatGPT, Midjourney, and all these tools of simulation. These tools and applications of simulation, HAL, which is the hallmark of the Archons, are the results of human technology. The Archons did not create AI, but the creation of AI and the technology of IT by human animals goes to their advantage if you do not know the true character of AI. Only if you do not see it and know it directly could you ever possibly imagine with your epinoia that it can exceed and excel and defeat human intelligence. It can never do that. And the use of epinoia, imagination, to hype AI, either in a dystopian fashion, saying it's going to destroy us, or in a utopian fashion, saying it's going to enable us to make a better world, demonstrates the wrong use of imagination. You have to be able to use imagination to guide and frame your thinking. And these faculties of imagination and intelligence, epinoia and nous, are vividly clear when you dig down to the rock bottom of the source materials. So, there you have it. The true profile of the Archon overlord, who is a demented freak alien who works against humanity. The most heretical statement ever made in the history of religion or philosophy is that God is an insane alien who works against humanity. And for having come out and said that, the Gnostics were targeted and persecuted, and that is the long story which I tell in the beginning of Not in His Image. Finally, I just want to give you this little snippet for your Rigpa to contemplate. My argument against AI and the archontic intrusion into this divine experiment is elaborate and never-ending, as you know. But I can sum it all up. I can sum up the refutation of AI without even citing these texts by saying that AI is not wet. And because it is not wet, it cannot ever be alive, because everything that is alive organically is wet. You get that? Do you get the wet? And the wet is both cerebral, which is the wet of your brain. Do you know that your brain now has the consistency of a water-saturated Kleenex or a sponge? When you take the brain out from a dead body, it dries up, and so it looks like, cauliflower. But actually, right now, your brain is a water-saturated sponge, like a huge mass of Kleenex, with billions of electronical and electrochemical circuits firing in it at every second. So, life is wet. Living intelligence is wet. And additional to the wetness of the cerebral instrument of the human animal, there is the wetness of you-know-what. You are born from fluids, from a combination of wet fluids in meiotic reproduction, the wetness of the male fluid. Inseminating, the wetness, ninefold wetness of the female animal. And you gestate in amniotic fluid that is wet. And when you come out of the Po, the port of entry, you're wet. Look at the newborn child. It's wet. They have to wipe off the amniotic fluid. So what is wet is alive. Archonic intelligence is not alive. It can never be wet. It can never have taste, like you have taste in the wet taste buds of your tongue. It can never have the wetness of a kiss. It can never, ever be alive. And to believe it can is to fall into the self-delusion of the archons and the satanic demiurge. Now said, and I'll be seeing you in the beauty that awaits, in the beauty that wets.